Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers of happiness, joy, and a centered approach to success in life. Seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation, and we're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
All right, so this week I was in my Vistage group, which is my CEO roundtable, and our Vistage chair always does a really good job of trying to structure the meeting, make sure it's high value for everybody.
Sure, yeah.
We process issues, we do business updates and things like that. Speakers. But this week we didn't have a speaker, so Rich threw out kind of a little exercise for us to do.
Ooh, fun!
Yeah, and he played a TED Talk from an investor who looks at like startup companies, and looks at the founders specifically. And she was saying that one of the traits that they look for in founders is adaptability. They want people that are highly adaptable.
Sure, that makes sense to me.
Which totally makes sense. Like when you're in a startup and things are ebbing and flowing and moving, you're trying to find your way through the forest, you do often have to be adaptable.
Yeah, for sure.
And so he wanted to go through this exercise to help us understand how adaptable we were, share some stories around that, and talk about becoming more adaptable.
Oh, okay.
And then I was like, wait a second, you're kind of starting from a perspective that the people in this room aren't that adaptable. And I would argue that in a room of entrepreneurs, adaptability is kind of a trait that's almost like selected for. Like we probably have a higher amount of adaptability with the people in that room than a normal room.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking, well, we might be coming at this from the wrong angle, because for me, sometimes my adaptability gets me in trouble.
I think I've been with you on a couple of those occasions.
A couple of those little adventures. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about just generally adaptability. And I really wanted to hear from you because
this is an interesting topic.
From baseline, from the big 5 personality traits, can you just talk about adaptability and how that trait shows up for people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, I'll just speak from the Melissa version, not the psychologically, whatever.
Not the science version.
Not the science version. That's really scary for me. I think just adaptability, as we're using this phrase, is just our ability to modify ourselves situationally, or our ability to not do that, right? And how we see ourselves. So I think being adaptable is first that we have to see ourselves with a level of flexibility, and it is measured on all of those assessment tools that you're talking about, sort of on a continuum scale, if you just say a 0 to 10 scale or whatever. So on one end is the very rigid, what you see is what you get person, right? And if filling out assessment tools, that person would be the one who maybe they're talking about extroversion and it says you are extroverted, and the person says, yes, I'm extroverted. And then the next one says, you feel comfortable talking to anyone. And then that person may say, I'm not going to check that because I already said I was extroverted. So as the test assessment goes on and gives several examples of the same thing, if this individual has only selected the first one because they feel that adequately describes who they are, they don't see each other, they don't see themselves as flexibly or as adaptable. Whereas the other side of that spectrum is every single thing having to do with extroversion, that person still checked, yes, me, yes, me, yes, me. So you still have an extroverted individual, but that construct of adaptability is very, very different. So I love how your chair was pointing out his premise, his belief about adaptability, which is probably steeped in his belief of himself, measuring against the rest.
Yeah, I bet so.
Yeah.
So give me an example of what would be the behavior of someone who is really adaptable?
Oh,
what do
yeah.
you see them doing that's different than someone who's not very adaptable?
Yeah. So like, let's say someone's walking into a company because they have an interview. Okay. And they don't know where to park. So they end up parking in the back parking lot instead of the front parking lot. So they end up walking through the back of the building, through the dock, and they're, it's awkward and a bit uncomfortable. They're not sure what they're doing. Somebody that is lacking in adaptability will not think about moving their car. They're going to just stick with that status of what they're doing, keep their head down, and try to get through. If they see other people to talk to along the way, they may or may not ask for help because they're in their own zone. They just they've got a preconceived idea of what they're going to be doing, and that's that. Somebody that has high adaptability, however, may park in the back parking lot, and then they have a very simple time talking with the dock person all the way up to the CEO. They're adapting themselves to match sort of the energy of the people that they're talking with, or their environment, or their circumstances. And the less adaptable person, it doesn't mean that they can't do that, but it takes a lot more energy for them to do that. So the less adaptable individual may still be perfectly fine, but usually what we always say about that is the person that has lesser adaptability, what you see is what you get. They're going to act the exact same in any situation because that's how they are. And they see nothing wrong with that. They're very comfortable with that. And then
in a lot of ways, like, that's a great trait, right? I like people who show up the same way all the time. And it's very reliable and consistent and comforting.
Yeah. And for me, I have no judgment on either way. Maybe it's just my conditioning for being in my role for so long. But then the highly adaptable people are constantly morphing and shifting and, situationally picking up the energy and maybe not even recognizing that they're modifying themselves.
Yeah. And one thing that comes to mind with that is like, kind of like an easy test is if you travel somewhere else and they have a different accent, how quickly do you start mimicking the accent in the culture you're in?
I've been teased about this forever, right? Because my BFF Fiona from the UK, my husband is like, oh, every time you talk to her, you talk like her.
Yep.
And I'm like, I do? Like, I don't even hear it.
But so I think it's interesting, this idea, like again, not in a judgy way, like is adaptability good or bad? It just kind of is on both sides.
Objective.
And there probably are times where if you're not naturally adaptable, that you can maybe like move yourself into being a little bit more.
Yeah.
And if you are highly adaptable, there's probably times where you need to move yourself into being a little bit more steady.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think, as we talk about adaptability, like I was using the job interview as an example. It's like one thing employers are very keen on when they take assessment tools into account when they're making hires is, or they used to be, they're getting better with this now, but they used to say, oh, this person may or may not match what we're looking for, but wow, look at that adaptability. They have such a high adaptability. We can put them in something that isn't naturally suited for them because their adaptability will help them survive. And I think it's really important to not judge adaptability, but to be, like you're saying, be more objective and observational about what it is in your own system and those around you. Because I think there is exactly like anything else. You can go too far and you can certainly go not enough.
One question I had during our meeting for the group was what kinds of roles are better suited for people who are highly adaptable versus people that are a little more steady?
Yeah. Well, you didn't tell me you were going to interview me about
I know.
This you tricked me. This is a trick.
Come on, Melissa. Adapt to it. Roll with the punches.
Man,
Let's
that's
go.
So mean-spirited.
It's a test.
You know what? We'll usually talk about adaptability in the hiring scenario. So like what you're talking about is those that are in leadership roles, those who are working with people a lot, the higher the level of adaptability, the easier it is for them to be in partnership with others, okay? The less amount of adaptability, that might be okay still if their natural personality traits really align with what the job is. So if you're looking for a salesperson and that salesperson, we need certain things out of that salesperson. We need them to be have the ability to connect with people and communicate well. And we also need to have them have a level of assertiveness, for example. Like we want them to be able to drive business and ask for things even if it's uncomfortable. Like those are a couple of the markers that we need. If we have somebody who has a lower level of adaptability, yet they nail that profile perfectly, they're still probably going to be, fairly successful.
Yeah.
Or maybe very successful. Yet if we ask them to be something and they're nothing like that, then it's like kind of two strikes. It's very, very difficult. And it's hard. And I always think too, it's like, forget about how we're looking at them and if we're judging them or we're observing them. How do they feel? If you continually put yourself in positions where you have to act outside of who you really are, that is exhausting and defeating and not much fun.
Yeah. Actually, we kind of talk about that in the self-awareness journey. Like when you're off kilter and you're in your actor self and not your authentic self, that is like an adaptation, right? You are adapting to not being quite yourself, and you can do that for maybe a little while. And you can do that for a long while if you're really adaptable, but eventually it's going to snap.
Yeah, eventually you will just go back to who you are naturally because it's just too hard not to.
So let's go on if you are overly adaptable.
Yes.
Like when can adaptability go too far?
How come we can't talk about the other one first?
Because it does, because the idea is they're really easygoing. They roll with the punches. They can ebb and flow with the situation. Like that all sounds like super cool to be.
Why wouldn't that be perfect?
That sounds awesome.
Why isn't that perfect?
But when can that go actually too far?
Yeah. What do you think? I'm going to interview you now, you little weasel.
Turn the tables.
That's a really good question. So I'm interested.
Well, I would say I probably feel some of this myself that a lot of the times I won't say no to things. I will not set very good boundaries because I want to be kind of super accommodating. So that's been trouble before.
Yeah.
I should say no to things, or I should set boundaries around things, which I just really don't do because I'm like, I don't know, it'll be fine. Right. I say that a lot. We'll just do that and it'll probably be fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes it's really not fine. And I should have said no.
So I have a question. So when you make that decision in that moment, can you tell that you shouldn't have done that? No, that sounds judgy. Can you tell that you didn't want to and that it sits in your system even after you were more agreeable externally?
Oh, yeah. And as I've gotten older, I've been way better at calling it in real time. But when I was younger, I would do that all the time. I would do all sorts of people pleaser stuff and just chalk it up to be me I can just go with the flow on whatever. And some of those situations were not great, either get taken advantage of or it would cause resentment in me. I'm doing all this stuff and, and so there's there is a bad side of being too overly going with the flow.
I would say, even, our personalities are so different. And yet there's been many times when I've been a people pleaser too, where which, a lot of people tease me and say, oh, you're so opinionated, you're so strong or whatever. But there's been a lot of times where I have just not said anything to keep the peace because I didn't want to make a ruckus. I would get a stomach ache. Or I would not say anything and just really, instead of, I think actually what I did in my younger days, and maybe occasionally now, but not really, I don't think as much, is when I would do something like that, I would be too accommodating in a situation or too adaptable in a situation, then rather than, be angry at the situation or the person, I really got mad at myself. And I talked really poorly about myself. Why can't you? Why do you never can, why is that? You're a terrible person for not blah, 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 fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So I think being really overly accommodating can be hard. Overly adaptable can be hard on ourselves, not the situation or the other people we're engaged with.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think it'd be interesting to sort of sort out about the situations in my life and in your life and others when you find you are being jumping into the overly adaptable position? You know, is it to avoid conflict? Is it around a topic that you know has a lot of energy or a consistent problem that people keep having to manage or deal with? Like, I think it's interesting to pick that apart a little bit to decide, how is it that I'm jumping into this role in this moment of being too adaptable?
Yeah. It's a good that's a good question. I'll have to start noting that. And a thing that happened at work over many years, which actually did cause quite a problem with my partnership, you know, like 15 years ago, was some of this behavior where, like, since I was pretty adaptable and pretty good at just like picking up new and different things and just kind of jumping in and doing it, that caused me to, like, not intentionally, but it just caused me to start taking over more and more parts of our business.
Oh, right. So your workload tripled.
So my workload
quadrupled.
got way more, but it wasn't that, you know, it wasn't like unmanageable. It wasn't a big problem. I just would do the things that needed to get done. But probably for mine and my partner's relationship at that time, to him, that might have looked very different. Like, why is JJ taking over all of the things? When my mindset was more like, why is no one else doing anything? I better jump in here and do this.
So that's really interesting, because you're talking about your activity of being overly accommodating, but this is a very interesting perspective, is how you're seeing yourself versus how the people around you are seeing you. I mean, that's really interesting to me, because when you see people being too adaptable at work today, or too adaptable full stop, what are the stories you tell yourself about that? Right?
Yep.
I mean, it's easy to judge. It's so easy to judge someone else.
Yep.
And we try to give ourselves grace, but we don't usually do so with others as much.
I think it's actually even easy to get taken advantage or take advantage of people that are highly adaptable. Because they just kind of roll with the punches and generally don't complain about it.
Yeah.
Okay. What about on the not adaptable side of this coin? Like, we spent a lot of time talking about being adaptable, probably because you and I are pretty adaptable.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but I think it's two ends of the stick, you know? Yeah.
So what about this, the other end of this stick? What if you are less adaptable? How does that affect you? Like, can you go too far in not being adaptable enough? Just being that steady quotient.
Yeah. I think I've seen that lots and lots of times. And when I get phone calls from employers to do some coaching for people in the business, if it's coming at it from that perspective, it's usually because of a lack of adaptability in something. A lack of awareness and then a lack of adaptability, or maybe the other way around. Not being as adaptable or being even aware that they're not. And I think that can cause a whole bunch of problems in partnerships with people too. I think it's easy to get judged. I think it's easy for people to put you in a bucket. For people to dismiss all of your other qualities if you're not able to be flexible in partnership with some. You know, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens there. I think it's a more overt, you know, if you're looking at adaptability on a scale, I think that the lower adaptable folks are way more overt. Like, you notice that, I think.
So how does that show up for, you know, like at work? 'Cause to me, that kind of low adaptability might show up. I don't know if it would. Does it show up in phrases like, I'm not going to do that. That's not my job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I've always done it. That's another one.
That's how we do it. Like, we've always done it this way. This is how we're going to do it. Like, we're not going to change. Why are we changing? Yeah.
What's wrong with this?
Yeah.
What's wrong with it just being like this? This has always worked just fine.
And for some industries, that's actually a really good thing to have in place.
Well,
because I would there's lots of places where no, we're not experimenting here. We are doing the process the same.
Well, actually, I'd even go not just industry, but I'd say position, title. You know, there's a lot of jobs where we don't want people to be adaptable and switching things around. Yeah. We want them to be exactly the same and have the level of output to be precise and exact.
Yeah, we need to adhere to these rules and these specs and these processes, and it cannot deviate from this.
Yeah. So going back to the discussion we were having earlier about the hiring process, again, if you see somebody, like, let's use a completely opposite example. Let's say you need somebody in customer service. Okay. That is what we would typically call a coat hanger personality pattern is the best one. And what that means is that the person has a moderate level of assertiveness. They have a very high sense of urgency, and they have a very high sense of detail, and they're not extroverted. Whoa, right there, everybody stops and goes, no, this is customer service. They're working with people all the time. Yeah, but we don't want them to sit on the phone. We want them to hear the problem, solve the problem, be specific, get off the phone.
And move on, yeah.
Repeat. Okay, that personality profile, if somebody applied and had that exact personality profile with the number one adaptable, like not adaptable at all, right? I'd be super comfortable hiring that person because their natural traits are exactly what's needed again. It's if we tried to push that person into like a closing sales role or a supportive role where they were training and developing people and how to think and how to be, that would be exhausting for that person. So again, it's very situational on a business front.
Yeah.
But I think on a personal front, it's not that situational. I think on a personal front, it's much harder. If you have people that are close to you and are not adaptable at all, I think that's very hard for somebody who has an average or higher level of adaptability. It's tiring because we feel like, ooh, there it is again. Like we can see it. I think when you have higher level of adaptability with somebody that doesn't, you can see it and feel it right away, and the other person doesn't necessarily. And that's hard.
Just trying to think about how this relates to my life.
Just walk in a real wide circle right now. That's what I'm doing. I just think we all have people in our lives that we just think, oh, can't you just go with it for once? Like, I know you've always made this decision over and over again, but can we just this once do it differently and be okay with that? I think that's how it manifests in real life.
Yeah. I know, I was thinking like, I've been trying to convince Amber to like buy a camper van and just wander around the country. Why is she not super stoked about that?
Because the idea is scary.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with anything else.
Unrelated to that topic, how can you become more adaptable? If you want to be more adaptable, like what are some things do you think you can do to like exercise that muscle a little bit?
Well, you know how we've always used like the John Maxwell conversation about when he's developing leaders. He always says, if you're working with somebody on a scale of 1 to 10 and they're at a 4, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. If somebody's at a 4, it's very likely you can help them get to a 6. It's not likely you're going to get them to a 7, 8, or anything more than that. I think this adaptability conversation is exactly the same way. I don't think you're ever going to go from not being adaptable at all to wildly adaptable or vice versa. Do you?
No, I don't think so. I think
not without putting yourself away.
Yeah, or some sort of really traumatic life event or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But that's what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not talking about a radical shift. I'm just talking about like how can we, if we need to do something for, if we do have a situation where we do want to kind of be a little bit more adaptable than our natural wiring, do you think this is a thing we can learn to be more comfortable with, or is it too set?
No, I don't. I personally don't think. I personally believe in the human nature enough where I am willing to bet on the human every single time. And what I mean by that specifically is I think that if you are in a position of adaptability that you're not comfortable with or that somehow causes you to be unhappy in your life, and that could be on either end of the scale, then and that awareness is such that you just feel uncomfortable because of it, and you know it's exactly what it is. Then I think mentally thinking it through is very helpful, because I think sometimes the adaptability piece causes an emotional response in us or those around us, and it's easy. You'd be easy to stay in the emotional sense and get angry about it or fight about it or whatever. But I think to really make some modifications, it's to think it through a little differently. It's like, Can you ask yourself objective questions about yourself? Like, I don't really feel good about being like this. What would be, where are some areas that I could, try something different that was more adaptable? Like, could I say yes when normally I want to say no? Can I say yes more?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good frame. I really like that. Can I say yes more?
Yeah.
The other question I'd ask is like, is there something in this new situation that like is scary? Is there some fear around a thing? And maybe try to like unpack a little bit of that, because you might not want to try something new based on some past fear that you just haven't really dealt with yet.
Oh, I agree. That's a really good one, which also makes me think about control. If we are fearful, that is a natural response for us to want to have control and to control more things, which is the exact opposite of being adaptable, isn't it?
Actually, that is an excellent point, is control, is adaptability and control. I think you're absolutely right. When people move into a space where they're adapting to something, the trade-off is likely control.
They're letting go of some of that control.
Yep. So you maybe think about your relationship with control. That's another really good topic for a future conversation, isn't
I'll
it?
go ahead and write that down now.
Well, I was sharing with the group as we were wrapping that whole exercise up, that one of my like kind of fantasies is getting dropped off in the middle of the woods, not knowing where I am, and then just like trying to figure out how to get out.
No, absolutely not. That sounds terrifying.
We can't just figure it out, And they're like, "What are you talking about, dude? Like, do you have food? Do you have shelter? Is this a naked and unafraid thing? Like, what are you talking about?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, wouldn't it be like a fun team building event? Just get dropped off, completely lost, just trying to figure it out. And that's when the first thought popped into my head. Like, maybe I'm too adaptable. Because if that sounds like a good, like an idea of fun, like apparently that's not commonly shared.
Maybe we need to walk this back just a little bit.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well. Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation, and share this episode with them.
We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring.